Hey, it's Amy Scott Grant, your favorite spiritual ass kicker, back with part 2 in this ego work, right? And this is really about confidence. Ooh, yeah, because confidence is sexy, isn't it? You know who else is sexy? Gannon. Yep, she's super sexy. Just like sticking a Post-it note on your head. Can't do that if you're not confident. You know, it's my confidence. It's my right relationship with my ego that allows me to stand up here and make a total goofball out of myself, right? Because I'm really clear that I'm hilarious. And from time to time, I meet someone who thinks otherwise. Like, I mean, I'm telling you, I've been at like parties and stuff, and there'll be like one guy. There's like one guy, and I'm like on fire, and everybody's like dying laughing, and one guy's like, and I'm like, I just feel bad for him, right? Because I'm like, that's so sad that he can't appreciate like good comedy when it's like literally standing right next to him at a party. Like, I know it's not me because other people are laughing and I am cracking myself up. So, but you know, you have to have confidence. I think you have to have confidence to be funny, because if I were to try to be like too polished and too perfect with you, it would come off as inauthentic, because that's not who I am, right? And I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm shooting 3 videos today because the light is very flattering, okay? So that's probably a little ego talking, like I want to look good on camera, but I'm also not afraid to like make stupid faces and look like a complete goofball. Because I know it'll make you laugh, it'll brighten your day, and it's just like who I am. So what you see is what you get here. All right, so more about confidence. Isn't this gorgeous? This is one of those boom word plaques, and I made this one for my daughter Sally, who some of you guys know and love. But that's really what she is working on this year, is confidence. So perfect timing. Okay, so when your relationship with your ego is out of alignment, that causes a breakdown in self-trust, okay? And it creates self-doubt, and it causes you to always be second-guessing yourself. Like, did I say that right? What if I make a mistake? I don't know if I did the right thing, right? You start second-guessing yourself, and you become, like, the more that you do that, it's kind of a slippery slope, and you become filled with self-doubt. Now, I was like, what is the definition of confidence? And I tried to like, channel it, and nothing came. So I went to the old interwebs, typed in define confidence, and saw what came up. And do you know what the definition of confidence is? I mean, I know you know what it means, but do you know what the definition is? I didn't, so I'm glad I looked it up. It's firm trust. Hello? I'm like, oh my God. It is, right? It's amazing to me. As a writer, how often I look up words and I'm like, oh, that's so what that is. But you know what? Sometimes I'll look up words and I'm like, oh, no, that's not, wow, I would not have put it in those words, but that's true, right? In fact, I highly recommend you do that with your boom word. When you're choosing your boom word for the year, and I think I talk about this in 2018 Boom, I do recommend that you go look up the definition, because you'd be surprised how many times you're like, this is what I want. You look it up and you're like, ew, that doesn't resonate at all with the feeling that I had and what my impression of that word is. But words themselves carry a certain vibration based on their actual definition. So it is important to look up the word. You know, one of the words, so my word for this year is bold, right? And when I was trying to pick my word, I actually came up with brave. And I was like, oh, I really like brave. I really like that word. And I looked it up. Horrible. It's all about like pain. Like, I was blown away at how negative the definition of the word brave is. Okay. I felt so strongly about the word brave that I think I just caused the app to crash. Because while I was talking about how negative the definition of brave was, the app just totally crashed. And I'm like, I got plenty of memory. I don't know what's going on with my computer. Anyway, yes, words carry a vibration. It's important to understand that vibration if we're going to go around using those words. So that's why I looked up confidence and saw that the definition, the succinct definition, is firm trust. Remember that, because it's going to come back towards the end of this video. All right. Now, if you don't already know, I have a whole series of YouTube videos on how to eliminate self-doubt and how to build more self-trust. So I would advise you to go and watch those. Why not? They're free. They're awesome. They're super short too. I think each one is like 5 minutes long or less. So, but what I don't talk about in those videos, which I do feel is really worth mentioning today, is that it really starts like building self-trust. You can cover a lot of ground towards self-trust by just getting in right relationship with your ego, by just creating a partnership with your ego. Now, in the last segment, we talked about looking at ego as though it's your ally, as though it's your best friend, which it is. But here's some things I want to talk about related to confidence that I feel like will be helpful to you. And I got my little notes here, right? So let's talk about false confidence, because that is really, right? Like false confidence is just icky. It feels icky. It sounds icky. It's perceived by other people as icky. So let's talk about what that is and what it looks like so that you can not only recognize it, well, by realizing how you recognize it in others, you can start to see it in yourself, because that will really show you where you're not in right relationship with your ego so that you know what to fix, right? You know what there is to clear. So when you see false confidence in other people, how does that feel to you, right? It just feels yucky. It feels gross. It feels, like you kind of want to get it off of you. You kind of want to take a shower. It's like used car salesman kind of thing. It feels inauthentic. It may feel like the other person is overcompensating. It feels like they talk about themselves a lot and they're really more interested in talking about themselves than in listening to or being interested in anything about you. And that's not usually somebody that we want to be around, right? In fact, a study was done years ago where they so I forget who did the study. It was somebody like important or whatever, like prestigious, like Harvard or whatever. But somebody did a study where they planted people on airplanes, and the people on the airplanes were given specific instructions on how to relate to the person sitting next to them. And what they did is they had two groups, right? Well, I'm sure they probably had a control group too, but they had two groups. One group talked mainly about themselves, and the other group was instructed not to talk about themselves at all, but merely to ask questions and engage the other person. So to keep, if the conversation came to themselves, they were to redirect it back to the other person. So that resulted in them mainly asking questions of the other person. Then the people who were not the plants were interviewed after the experiment, like after they came off the plane, said, tell me about the person sitting next to you. And the people who sat next to the person who primarily spoke about themselves were like, I sat next to the worst guy. He was just the worst. Like, he just would not shut up. They thought the person was obnoxious, rude, insensitive. They didn't like them at all. And the people who sat next to the person who was instructed to ask questions toward their person and to show interest in them went on and on about what a great conversationalist they had sat next to, right? Even though the person never talked about themselves, they only asked questions about the other person. They're like, so knowledgeable, such a great conversationalist, right? Because people want you to show an interest in them and not just talk about you the whole time. So when we see false confidence in someone else, it really comes off like, all they talk about is themselves. That's because they need you to know how great they are. Because they don't believe it, they're not certain of it, so they're trying to convince you of it to get some of that external validation, okay? That's why they do that, a little bit of the psychology behind that. By the way, I'm not a psychologist, so I'm saying that, but that's really not my area of training. So I just know why people do what they do, right? Because I can tap in and I'm super interested in that. But, okay, now what happens if you have a false sense of confidence in yourself? Okay, how does that look and how does that show up? What you can look for is a need to prove, a need to show, right? A need to demonstrate, a need for external validation. It's like when you start becoming aware of this, you can hear things come out of your mouth and they start to sound like ew, right? Because they sound like the person you don't want to sit next to on the plane. And you're like, oh, that's me right now. Gross, right? So it's like, look how good I am. That's kind of the message of whatever a false sense of confidence is saying. It's like, hey, look how awesome I am. I need you to see how awesome I am and believe that. When I first started coaching, where's my, oh, never mind. Like, I was looking for my homework for you, but it's up here. When I first started coaching, I made a list of like what I really wanted, like how I wanted this to go and who was my ideal client. You've probably heard me talk about this before, right? The list of characteristics of your ideal fill in the blank. You can use this to find the perfect car, the perfect mate, the perfect job, whatever. Well, when I first started coaching, I did this too because I wanted to attract the most ideal coaching clients. And one of the things that I was really clear about is that I didn't want to have to convince anybody how good I was or what I was worth. I was like, that whole part of the conversation, I'm not interested in. So I really wanted people to show up like already resonating with me and excited to work with me. And maybe they had some questions about what specifically I could do for them or what it might cost or how long it might take or what do we actually do in the sessions, like those kind of logistical questions. But I didn't want anybody showing up and being like, so, are you really good at that? Like, I didn't want to have to convince anyone that I was good at this. That whole thing felt yucky to me. So I decided that I would attract people that already resonated with me, my work, and my message. And that's who showed up. Amazing, right? It works. This ideal characteristics list works. So I never had to convince anyone of that. Now, what's interesting is a lot of times I find when people first start out as light workers, they ask me things like, do I need certification? And what do I do if somebody asks me if I have certification? I'm like, do you have certification? They're like, no. I'm like, then say no, right? Like, to me, that's the obvious answer. And in all the years I've been doing this, I think I've ever had 2 people that asked me if I had any kind of certification. And I was like, nope. And they went, okay. And they got started anyway. Like, they paid me anyway. And we did awesome coaching and clearing work. But I don't have a fear that people will see me as unqualified. Again, why? Because on that confidence spectrum, I know exactly where I'm at on healing work. I know what I'm capable of, which also means without fear or embarrassment, I can tell you if I can't help you with something. If you came to me with an issue like, my dad has cancer, can you clear it? By the way, I've had like 3 people ask me that. I'm like, I don't know. Let me check in. I check in. No, I'm so sorry. I can't. If you like, I can help you with processing your feelings and your sense of loss that your dad has cancer, but I can't heal your dad's cancer. Doesn't mean I can't heal cancer, just means when I've checked in, it's gotten to know. We've shrunk tumors. We've done a lot of cool stuff. Resolved a lot of physical problems, but I don't have like attachment when I check in because I check in before anybody pays me. You're not paying me and then I'm like, oh shit, can I even do that? No, it's like we're clear what you're signing up for when you sign up. And I am clear that I can do it. Therefore, I have no problems receiving your money in exchange for my services. Okay. And we'll get to that too. There's another piece to that about confidence and ego, but it's later in the notes and I've stacked them this time. So I can't see them until I get through, what's ahead of that. So yeah, I was clear I didn't want to convince anybody of my worth or my skills, and I've never had to. So, yay me. That's awesome. Also, as you can probably tell, when I do these videos, I never edit out the flubs. Like, these videos are far from flawless. And granted, I'm comfortable talking to you in this format through video. I realize not everyone is comfortable with that. And I've coached people to be more comfortable with that. I know I have a knack for creating these videos. But I never edit out. I mean, I guess if I like totally lost my train of thought for 5 minutes, yeah, I'd probably edit that out just so you don't have to sit through it. But I don't edit out the ums and the, what was I saying again? Because it just feels inauthentic to me. Again, like I want to look good, right? But I don't need to look perfectly polished because to me, that's inauthentic. It's also not relatable. When I see a speaker who is like flawless looking and flawless speaking and they have like a perfect body, I'm like, that's all great what she's saying, but I can't necessarily relate to her because she seems too perfect. And I'm really clear that I'm not perfect. other than being divinely perfectly perfect, which I am, which you are, right? But like, I don't need to be that person who's super freaking polished. So I don't edit those out. Why? Because I have the confidence to know that what I'm saying has value and that you're not going to get totally tripped up because I used a couple of, let me think, what was I saying? If I did that all the time, that would make for a poor quality video. But, you know, once in a while, I mean, that's how people talk. If you talk to me in real life a couple of times, if we have a long conversation, I'm probably going to forget my train of thought once or twice, and I'll come back to it. You know, be patient, right? But anyway, that's why I have notes. And speaking of, this is like the perfect segue because we're 11 and a half minutes in, I see. I had a client tell me one time, by the way, this was at the end of her coaching package. She told me that I talk too much and too long, and therefore I lose my audience, and that I needed to completely overhaul the way that I presented information. Otherwise, I would not be able to reach more people and grow. I sat with that. Okay. Now this is what I was, sort of alluding to earlier. This is something else we're going to talk about. This is what authentic confidence can do. This is what a right relationship with your ego can do, is you can receive feedback that may or may not be kind, but you can receive feedback that's not vindictive. Or just sometimes people just say shit because they're jealous, right? No, I could tell like this person really believed this. And she was telling me this because she felt like it would help me. She didn't say it in the super nicest way, but whatever. I was able to just sit with that. Like, oh, I've never considered that. That's a very interesting perspective. And after sitting with it, I decided, nope, this is who I am. This is how I talk. This is how long I take to tell a story. I've tried shortening it. Actually, I've shortened it way more than I used to, right? Videos used to be like 45 minutes long, and now they're about 20 minutes. So, I mean, I have cut that in half. And I've had people tell me, you need these little quick 1-minute things. I'm like, I'm not a 1-minute person. If you hang out with me, like, you might be laughing in a minute, but you're not going to get your takeaway in a minute. I'm not a sound bite kind of person. I'm a storyteller. I'm a writer. This is what I do, and we're developing a relationship right now while you're here hanging out with me. That's just who I am. I can't be who I'm not. Spoken like a person who has a defined self-center, sense of, the self-center, the solar plexus. If you have a defined solar plexus in human design, you are who you are. You can't ever be somebody else. Like, it feels wrong and inauthentic if you try and be someone else, as opposed to somebody that has an open, undefined sense of self or their solar plexus. They can blend. They're like a chameleon. They can blend in with any group. Nope. I'm always Amy. Wherever I go, whoever I'm with, me. This is what you get. So but I sat with it because of the right relationship with ego means that you're able to like sit with constructive criticism and go, okay, let me look for the truth in this. And I really did. And I tell you, I actually circled back to it like a year later because I sat with it and then I was like, nope, screw it. I am who I am. She didn't like it. I don't really care. She's one person, right? I got to live with me. She doesn't got to live with me. She can go find another coach. Buy packages up anyway. If she wants to work with somebody else, she's totally free to do that, right? But I am who I am. But I actually circled back to it like a year or two later. And I mentioned it to a couple of people that I was working really closely with, not clients, right? More like peers. I mentioned it to them and they, you know what they both said? I'm like, yeah, I probably should figure out brevity. Like that's something that I should really work on. And you know what they both said? They said, bullshit. They're like, I love your stories. I'm like, you do? But I do kind of take a while to like get to the point. They're like, yeah, but you're super entertaining when you do it. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. I really am hilarious. They're like, I know, right? So I'm like, screw it. It's okay for me to be me. But it was my right relationship with ego which then my resulting confidence, which allowed me to be able to look at that and explore that and say, maybe they're right. Now, when you have really low self-esteem, you take everything on. If someone's like, your hair is too black, your eyes are too bright, your teeth are too crooked, you're like, oh my God, I gotta go schedule this, and I'm gonna have this done, I'm gonna have this fixed, I'm gonna have this fixed. That's really low confidence, right? False confidence is dismissing all feedback because you didn't like it or it didn't feel good to hear or it didn't, or you're like, that's not something you want to look at about yourself. That's false confidence. Make sense? You get the difference there? Okay, good. So yeah, here's what my notes say. Do I talk too much? I don't know. I have a lot to say and it matters. So I talk. And if you don't like it, you're more than welcome to find somebody. Focus. There we go. You're more than welcome to find somebody who is better at brevity, who is more succinct than I am, right? But you're still here and we're still hanging out because it's cool. Like we're simpatico. So we hang out, right? Plenty of fish in the sea. It's another thing confidence says. They don't just like dismiss everything. Like if I had people leaving in droves, if I had people quitting Patreon in mass numbers, I would look at like, what is going on? Okay. What did I change something? Do I need to change something? No, but we're cool. Everything's cool. And I feel good about where we're at. You must feel good where we're at because you're still here, right? You're still watching this. So when you're in a right relationship with ego, you're not easily wounded. Okay. So that means people can say things. And even if it doesn't feel great, you can just look at it and go, like, you don't have to be all like wounded puppy, like, I can't believe she said that I talk too much. And I like the way I talk and I can't help it. I grew up in the South and people talk a lot. And right. You don't have to go through any of that stuff. You don't have to get wounded. It might sting a little. Like it doesn't, I'm going to tell you right up, like, when I get criticism, it doesn't feel good, but it's like, okay, obviously there's something for me to look at here. If you consider that everything's a mirror, then the universe is mirroring back to you. Now, sometimes if you get a lot of negative feedback, that's not true. It's because you have these fears about yourself. And so they're being mirrored back to you by other people. But confidence means you can look at that criticism and weigh it objectively and say, oh, is this something that I need to look at? Maybe you do a peer review and you ask some people that you trust, who know you really well, who will be honest with you. Like, is this an issue? And they might have the courage to say, yeah, it is. And you go, wow. Many, many years ago, so my husband and I have been married like over 20 years. And I know, right? How could I possibly be married for 20 years? Now stop you. Confidence. All right. But really, we have been married for over 20 years. In fact, we have an anniversary coming up next month. And when we first started dating, someone made a comment to me about sarcasm. And this was before I had done any ego work. So believe me, it stung. It definitely stung. And this was over 20 years ago. And it was like, I had no idea that I was like picking on my husband, like in front of other people. Like I don't know. I just was doing it to get laughs, or maybe that's how my mom had treated my dad, or I don't know, but I wasn't aware of it until someone pointed it out. And then when someone pointed it out, it was kind of like, no. And then I saw it for myself because my awareness was raised. And I went, oh, that's really shitty. I don't want to be that person. I know people like that. They're uncomfortable to be around. When one of the partners is constantly picking on the other partner, it makes everyone else uncomfortable. Like, I don't like to be on the other end of that. And I thought, oh, I'm that person. I don't want to be that person. So that awareness gave me the ability to change, right? And to not be like that. So this is, I didn't have to get wounded. I was like appalled and shocked and embarrassed. And, I apologized to my husband, and it doesn't mean like I never pick on him, but I'm not like, I don't like hound him. You know what I'm talking about. It's like really uncomfortable when somebody's like totally dressing down their spouse in front of everyone. And it's like awkward. Yeah, no, I'm no longer that person. Okay. So I'm happy to say, but again, you don't have to get wounded when you get criticism like that. You can actually take it under advisement and look at it objectively and then make shifts if you want to. So the reason that it doesn't, that you don't have to get wounded in these types of situations is, by the way, I have to point out, hilarious that I spend so much time talking about how much I talk. We're over 20 minutes now. Damn. All right. Well, I will finish in less than 24. Okay. So hang with me. We're almost there. But the reason that you don't have to get wounded when you're in right relationship with ego, see, that's the other thing. If I talk too fast and people are like, oh my God, slow down. I can't understand a word you're saying. This is my slow talking, by the way. So if you give me coffee, I'm like, oh, I'm like a squirrel. Can't talk. I like talk so fast. It's ridiculous. Okay. The reason you're not affected, you don't have to get wounded when you get criticism when you're in right relationship with ego, is because your sense of worth and self-confidence is intrinsic. When you and ego are like partners, when you're like this, when you're working in, what do you call it? In sync with each other, not like the band, but like IN, sync. When you're in sync with each other, then your self-worth becomes intrinsic. It's something that comes from inside of you, and you know your value. You get into danger when your self-worth is extrinsic, when you need validation from other people in order to feel confident, because that is a bottomless pit. You can't ever fill up that hole, okay? No matter how much external validation you get, this is why narcissists end up on the path that they're on. Like, they need all of this attention and all of this focus on them, but it's never enough. And so their shenanigans get bigger and bigger and crazier, and they suck you into their crazy world, right? They'll never fill that hole. It's just vast and endless, okay? And when your self-worth is extrinsic, that is just a hole that you'll never be able to fulfill, okay? And also, you'll be affected by every negative comment that you ever get. When your self-worth lives outside of you and other people give you negative feedback, you can't help but like take that personally and feel really crappy about it. No bueno, right? Because this is life and people are opinionated and you're going to get negative feedback. And having a healthy relationship with ego where your self-worth is intrinsic, when you know what your worth is, when you can accomplish something and you know you did an amazing job, and you could feel amazing about that, that is a whole different energy than when you made something and you think it's pretty good, but you need other people's opinion to validate that it's good. Because what if you get the opinion from the wrong people who don't know shit about what you're doing, or they don't even understand where you're coming from, and they give you negative feedback? That's how budding artists get shut down. That's how writers like stop writing and they're like, my work is no good. Why? Because somebody else said so? Do you know it's good or not? So this is a huge benefit of being in right relationship with your ego, is having that intrinsic sense of self-worth. So here's your homework if you choose to accept it, because I'm not attached if you do this or not. And if you don't like the word homework, feel free to call it something else. But I just call it that because it's easy enough and I don't have a negative charge around homework. But my kids go to Montessori school, so they don't have a lot of homework. But all right. Your homework, if you choose to accept it, is to look for evidence in your life of firm trust, okay? Which is the definition of confidence. Remember, I told you we'd circle back to that. Feel into what that feels like. I bet there's at least one area of your life where you have firm trust. That might be in your relationship, or in your cooking skills, or in your smile, or in your ability to make people feel better. Or maybe you have great hair, or maybe you know how to arrange flowers, or maybe you're a really good writer, or maybe I don't know, right? It doesn't even matter what it is. But some area of your life where you have confidence, you have firm trust. Maybe you just know that a certain person loves you and you have confidence in their love for you, okay? Feel into what that feels like, that firm trust, and really get a sense of where it lives in your body and in your bones, okay? Then imagine, what if you had that feeling, that sense in other areas of your life? Like, pick an area of your life where you don't feel confident, you don't feel firm trust, you don't have that intrinsic self-worth about your ability. And imagine, kind of map it on. Take that sense of firm trust and map it on to a place where it doesn't yet exist. And notice, what would change for you? What would shift in your life? Now, if you do that, this is really going to set you up in the right way for what we're going to do next week. Because next week, I'm going to create an audio clearing for you. And it's going to be around getting into right partnership with ego. It's going to be around building confidence and firm trust in yourself. So if you do that homework, it's really going to set you up on the right foot. Damn, I went a minute and a half over. That's okay. It was worth it. I hope you think so too. But if not, I totally know it was. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.